Christianity. Well, also, when Roman citizens saw Christians put in the arenas and torn apart by lions, and the Christians would die singing songs, singing hymns, or watch them being burned alive, and while they were being burned, they would sing. A lot of persons would say to themselves, hey, what they have, I want to join with them, because I'm going to die anyway. I might as well die happy like they're dying. And in other words, the persecution did not do anything except make Christianity stronger. I mean, look, you got here at page 144 that this persecution, in fact, served to strengthen it and also helped to become more organized. Now, during this time, the church organized itself into a ordained clergy. They set up the office of bishop. The bishop was like the local church leader. Now, eventually, the bishop became the next order up from priest. The Catholic Church, you start off as a parish priest and go from there to bishop and from there to archbishop. But the office of archbishop and cardinal and then pope were to come later. Yes, they had set up bishops in Rome. And interestingly enough, the present pope, when he took office about 18 months ago, told the world, I don't want to ever forget that in addition to being pope, I am also bishop of Rome. He said, I want to care for my city of Rome just as if I were just another bishop and not the pope of the whole church. But the bishops were set up in Rome. And initially, the Bishop of Rome did not have any authority outside of Rome, but eventually the Bishop of Rome built up his power more and more until he became Pope. Now, I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit. I had a student ask one time, what made the Pope so powerful? You don't find the office of Pope anywhere else in the world except for Western Europe, except for Christendom. And basically, here's how it happened. You had a political unity. And then the political unity, I took in the Pope as one of its officers, as the chief religious officer. Then the political unity disintegrated, fragmented, broke apart. But the Pope remained intact. So while the political leaders were all losing their power, the Pope became the one strong man of the hour. It helped also when Constantine moved over here to Constantinople, but left the Pope in Rome. The Pope was able to build up his power. More and more the Catholic Church took on the functions that the state once had, particularly performing marriages. And even into the 21st century, a lot of people do not consider themselves married until they've had a church wedding and heard the preacher or priest or whatever pronounce them man and wife. And again, this goes back to this time period we're talking about, where the popes began to assert a lot of the power, or the bishops rather began to assert a lot of the power that had formerly been invested in state officials. Now, people were in the habit of looking to Rome for aid, but when they looked to Rome, they were told, hey, the office of emperor is no longer here, but down the street a little ways there's a pope, maybe he can help you. So they'd go to the pope instead of the emperor, and oftentimes find that he could do a lot for them. What greatly enhanced the prestige of the Pope was when Pope Leo went out and talked to Attila the Hun, and it was said he persuaded Attila the Hun not to attack Rome. Again, that's what it looked like. Now, actually, Attila might have been afraid of being caught down here with a bunch of armies on the way into Italy. He might have been afraid of being caught with no place to run. Whatever, he left, and without sacking Rome, without attacking Rome. It made the Pope look really good in the eyes of the people at that time. Why were the persecutions? Several. One reason, Christianity at one point adopted the symbol of a donkey, and the people said that they're worshiping a donkey. This was a misconception. A lot of it was just plain old ordinary misconceptions. Christians referred to each other as brother and sister, and a Christian man referred to his wife as sister. And the other people who didn't know any better got the impression that Christians were marrying their sisters. Christian women were marrying their brothers. This was not the case, but the Christian women would call their husband's brother and call their wives sister. And again, Also, Christians were looked on as being weird for not taking part in the excessive parties. And one of the reasons they lived so long was they did not party excessively like the pagans did. So this helped them live long, but also made them look weird in the sight of others. It was said that Christians do not put perfumes on their bodies. And also, they did not worship the emperor. This was a huge misnomer. In fact, one pagan was trying to persuade a Christian bishop, said, hey, all right, you don't worship the emperor. I tell you, all you have to do is just make a pretense. You don't have to worry about them. We know the emperor is not God. Quite frankly, I don't believe it. And most of my fellow Romans, we don't believe it either. But we just do it because it helps keep the Roman government together, keeps the Roman people at peace. It looks good for the populace. Just all you have to do is bow down and I don't have to burn you. The bishop refused and he was burned at the stake. But again, he made an impression on the people who, because of his extreme steadfast loyalty. All right, before I proceed, does anyone have any comments, questions? Now, what I have just gone over, there have been thousands, literally, of books written about. I mean, and there have been magazine articles, there have been all kinds of writings about how Christianity came to the forefront, how it originated, why it spread. Again, no one particular cause. It just simply wound up taking over the Western world. Now, did it make any changes? I think quite a bit. For one thing, the practice of exposing babies you didn't want, that was stopped. I mean, at one time, if parents didn't want a child or the mother didn't want a child, just to take the child out in the woods, leave it, drop it, and let the wild animals. This was a widespread practice in the ancient world. Political assassinations. We've talked about that. Politics in the ancient world was filled with poisonings, assassinations. A lot of this stopped. In fact, assassinations from the time of between 500 and 1200, 700-year period, you only find about one or two of them. The practice of parents killing their children, I mean, I'm talking about grown children, largely stopped. I mean, Constantine, the first Christian emperor, not only killed his two sons, but wound up killing his mother. You might wonder, why would he kill his mother? She was domineering and tried to take over and run the show. I mean, after all, she was the wife of his father. I mean, she was the wife of Constantine's father, and somehow felt like, okay, I controlled my husband, I'm going to control my son also. And he felt like he had to get rid of her because she was going to louse things up if he didn't. I mean, hey, folks, this is part of what goes along with being emperor. I mean, you get high up and you sacrifice. I mean, I'm reminded of John Kennedy, who was told by his maternal grandfather, now, hey, John, I'm a liability to you. What you have to do is separate somebody. And young John said, but Grandpa, I don't have any vote, but you have to pretend you have to get rid of me, kick me out of your camp, because unless you do, you're going to lose, you're not going to win the congressional seat. I mean, so to win his first congressional seat, he had to axe his maternal grandfather out of his campaign and out of his life. Politics is dirty. At least he didn't have to kill his grandfather. At least he didn't have to go that far. But his grandfather said, "Yeah, hey, do what you have to do. This is politics." I mean, but anyway, a lot of this was stopped. Now, morality did not become perfect. In my way of thinking, it greatly improved. I had a teacher at UT who said you can say anything against the church that you want to. Then he'd go on and talk about what things the church had done, and one thing the church did was set up monasteries where they collected all the writings that they could get their hands on and preserved the writings of the writings of Plato, Aristotle, Xenophon, Thucydides, Tacitus, Cicero, preserved the writings of the ancients and carried them on to, Herodotus also, carried them on to the modern world. Without the church, we would not have a lot of these writings. Monks would sit in the monasteries and copy and copy and copy, and oftentimes when they get up at the end of the day, they had no idea what they'd copied. All right. Another thing Christianity did was it ended the practice of crucifixions, looked on as being too brutal. Jesus himself was crucified, and according to tradition, that is, the difference between history and tradition. Tradition is stories that were passed orally by word of mouth for several generations before finally being written down. In other words, it's not an original source, but according to tradition that's been handed down, most of the disciples were also crucified, except for John. Peter was said to have been crucified upside down. And to this day, when the Pope goes to his office, he sees Peter looking right at him, being crucified upside down, reminding the Pope that this job he's carrying can sometimes get awfully, awfully heavy to bear, the burden of the job. But crucifixions were outlawed, and slavery was outlawed, at least enslaving fellow Christians. Now, this was the change several hundred years later when they started importing African slaves. But Europeans replaced slavery with serfdom. The difference between a serf and a slave is a serf could not be bought or sold. Slaves could. Otherwise, serfs were looked on as being property, but the owner of a serf could not transport him from one place to another. So that was the difference. In other words, they would say, oh, we don't have slaves anymore. We outlawed slavery, which was true in as far as it went. Again, the story about how Christianity overcame all the problems it had from heresies, from persecution, from the mystery religions, from Gnosticism, from Arianism. We'll talk more about Arianism later. All these almost wiped Christianity out, but the bishops came in and they defined doctrine. And the result was Christianity wound up triumphing under its set of ordained clergy. The rest, they say, is history.